Good morning. My name is Victoria Grainger. Welcome to today's webinar on the topic of workplace well-being and productivity. This morning, as I said, my name is Victoria Grainger and I am the founder of Wellness Works Canada. We are Canada's first and only nonprofit association to support workplace wellness practitioners and employers in building healthy, high-performing work cultures. So today I am excited to be talking with you and talking about the topic of workplace well-being and productivity. And I'm even more excited to have with us today Lori Schmidt. So Laurie Schmidt I call her a productivity expert. She has a lot of letters behind her name. And she is the CEO of Laurel Management Group, which focuses on building stronger organizations through executive and organizational competitiveness advisory and coaching services. She's also the former chief executive officer of Grow Productivity, which is a nationally incorporated not-for-profit organization that really works to improve the productivity and innovation and competitiveness performance of Canadian firms. Lori is also an avid supporter and facilitator of creative and collaborative approaches to building capacity in organizations and the ecosystems in which they place, and in tackling regional and global competitiveness issues. So lots of really great big things. She's also got her economic development degree and a designation as a strategic alliance professional, also a mastery in organizational coaching, and is a member of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils, a global network of leaders from competitiveness organizations around the world. Laura's really a great believer that our people are really our most important resource, and has developed and delivered a range of workshops around this theme. She's also a strong advocate of giving back, and she's involved in several non-for-profit ventures, including serving on the board of Children Believe, which is an international organization that is dedicated to improving the lives of children and youth in developing countries around the world. Laura is also an active Rotarian, and most recently, she was identified as one of Canada's top 50 over 50 for her business and community leadership. So really thrilled to have her today talking a little bit about productivity. And I will also be speaking more on the topic of workplace well-being. And we'll be kind of teaming a little bit of the content today to be able to really achieve some of the outcomes that we have here, which are to, one, understand the connection between well-being and productivity in the workplace, and also really just to understand what your role is in supporting employee and workplace well-being and productivity. And then also, of course, we want you to be able to take away some practical tips to support well-being and productivity in your workplace and beyond. So today's webinar will be under an hour. We want to walk the talk and give you a little bit of time to have some well-being time for yourself before your next venture or whatever it is that you've got going on for the rest of today. We will also have leave time at the end for some questions from you all. However, we also do have a chat function, and so if you'd like to use that, to find it, you may have to hover your mouse at the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen, depending on your computer setup, and you should see a chat function there, and you can put in some questions. And today we also have some polls to try to keep it a little bit interactive throughout the session as well. So before we get into all of the talk about how well-being and productivity are intertwined, I'd like to put it out there and start to define and make sure we have kind of a common ground of really what is well-being in the workplace to begin with. So I do have a quick poll for you here, and I'm going to launch it on and allow you to vote, and so that we can just kind of hear from you about what your concept is of what well-being really is in the workplace. So you can see here, It could be to you having access to a gym and healthy, nutritious foods at work, having flexible options that support work life integration. Might be a workplace that allows employees to volunteer and give back during work hours, or having a great benefits plan, or having supportive management that care. So you can go ahead and select all that apply for you here. And we'll just give you a minute to complete this, and then we'll share the results and have a little chat about that. All right, so I see some comments as well here, and I see just a few more people. So far, it looks like having flexible work options that support work-life integration is kind of one of those top key things, and I think I would agree. All right, we'll just give it a couple more seconds here. We see a few of you have voted. Oh, and the tides are turning. It looks like now having supportive management that care is also one of these really top key things that really matter to the group here. All right. So I haven't, we don't have answers from quite everybody yet here, but just in the interest of time, we're just going to move forward. I'm going to share the results. So the top, as we can see here, was having flexible options that support work-life integration, followed by having supportive management that care. And I think, and so there were some comments in there as well that all of them really matter. And yes, I would absolutely agree. All of these things are important factors that can support well-being in the workplace. And you know, but it really depends sometimes on the workplace and what that current culture is. And so what I just kind of want to emphasize here is that workplace well-being is really all about culture. And culture is sometimes hard to define, right? But really it comes down to the way that work is done here. And a lot of people think, a lot of people try to influence culture in a positive way to support, have an innovative culture or a higher performing culture or a culture of health and or a culture of well-being. And really the key understanding here is that an outcome is really that culture is really an outcome. It's not something that necessarily just is, and understanding that it is an outcome of things like values and systems and processes and policies and even organizational structure. For example, a really tall hierarchical structure will create a different culture than one that is very flat, right? The job design in terms of even how much task variety there is, things like obviously flexibility, like most of you indicated, is one of those most important things. Even the demographics within the organization, and all of these things really impact culture. But knowing that it is an outcome of all these things is great, because then we know that we can start to look and understand at what is impacting culture in order to be able to change it. So some of these things that we looked at in the poll, like having access to a gym and healthy nutritious foods at work, are good things that can support health, but they're not going to necessarily shift the culture, right? Because if the culture is that people don't use those things, then they're not going to be of any of any benefit. Or if people aren't allowed to take time to use those things like the gym, then it's really not going to have any benefit. So culture is really, again, it's about an outcome of all of these things, and it's really about just the way that work is done each and every day. And last month we had a session about management philosophy, and so obviously, as a lot of you here said, having a supportive management that care is really one of those key things as well, that influence culture. And so, you know, when we're talking about a healthy workplace, we also have to keep in mind that productivity and workplace well-being are very complementary and can often and are very synergistic. And with Wellness Works Canada, we do a bit of advocacy work, and we really try to eradicate the dichotomy between thinking that investing in employee well-being and health, and then investing in productivity or in innovation or any of these other things are different avenues. Really, in order to be able to support a healthy, high performing culture, we need to look at these things as an integrated, connected type of approach in order to achieve, shared outcomes, right? So should never really be a program, because a program by definition has a beginning and an end. We want to have a culture of health, and in order to create a culture of health, looking at it, and the benefits that it has on productivity, et cetera, which Laurie's going to go into here in a minute, is really the best way to do things. So in light of that, and in light of really looking at eradicating this dichotomy that workplace well-being and productivity are different ventures, I am excited to introduce Laurie to take it over here and talk a little bit more about productivity and what productivity is and how that links to workplace well-being. So welcome.
Great. Thanks, Victoria, and hello, everyone. Productivity has become a very popular word over the last couple of years, and I've been on a journey to understand it within the context of organizations or firm-level productivity for at least 15 years, long before it was popular. And so let's launch into our next poll to say, what do you think productivity is all about? Just give it a few more minutes or seconds. Victoria will be able to show us where we are at. Very good. Very interesting. So time management is for sure a part of it. I'm so thankful that no one said, and surprised sometimes, that no one said downsizing or cost cutting, or replacing people with technology. Because with all of my engagements with businesses and nonprofits, productivity improvements have never resulted in laying off people. In fact, most organizations feel that they are resource challenged. So it really is all about small incremental improvements. In its simplest form, productivity is really measured by those continuous improvement efforts. So again, the small incremental improvements are ensuring that your people have the right tools and the skills and the process and the supports that they need to do their job effectively and efficiently. So, basically, the basic productivity metric or measurements is really about inputs and outputs. So what are you putting in and what are you getting out that is making you money? And so when you think about your businesses or your organizations, the output could be, the product sold, your tasks completed, your services provided, or things like tons of steel erected or pieces, produced. And the input really is you're looking at, it's the number of people hours, your dollar investment, that can be, capital investment or other types of investment in things like technologies, and your time. And international measures continue to look at our output per employee. So if we look at the metric of how productivity is measured at a national scale, and so taking a higher level look for a minute, the basic productivity framework breaks down the components of productivity at a national level in a more meaningful way. Our prosperity, whether it's a nation or a province or a region, is measured by GDP per capita or per person. And that measurement comes from our labor effort times our productivity. And we've tended to put most of our focus, as people looked at how to be more competitive, on the labor side of the equation, where we actually do quite well. We have a strong population, well educated. We employ the broadest range of employable people. And especially when you look at international comparisons, and I know that we can always do better, but we are performing very well there. And actually, we work the longest number of hours anywhere. So we squeeze a lot out of that labor side of the equation. And so we started to look more intently at the productivity side a number of years ago. And the sources of productivity growth comes from innovation, which, in the broadest sense, which is adding value to the products or processes or services that we provide, or through, and/or actually, operational efficiency, through continuous improvement to the systems and processes, even the supply chains that we have. And productivity is about focusing on both of these efforts. But the most important part of all of this is in Deming's quote, that 95% of all troubles in the organization are caused by the system, and only 5% are the fault of the people. And so I just feel that as we started to dig into the productivity side and overall metrics of this, we were missing a very important part of the equation. And the bottom line, as we move to the next slide, is that productivity really equals our resourcefulness. So all about unleashing the potential of people, all the resources that you have in your control and your time. It's about working smarter, not harder. And how do you support your people in being successful in all of this? I think the greatest learning that I've had in my career studying productivity and working with so many businesses is that the key is investing in our people. And so when you invest in your people, it leads to higher engagement and performance, and to higher attraction and retention rates. And leaders are more likely to invest in employees who are engaged and want to stay. So the cycle is healthy all the way around. So let's launch into our next poll, which is, what do you think is the biggest challenge to or of workplace productivity today? Just give it a few more seconds to let people get the responses in. This is a very smart crowd. So, you know, each of these things can, and thank you again for not saying that people aren't working hard enough. So, ineffective meetings and processes absolutely is part of it. Technology used in the right way, if we understand our processes and our systems. So, how we apply and look for technology to help us to continue to innovate and provide additional value is important. But that's not the biggest challenge of workplace productivity. You've nailed it. It's the people well-being and stress and mental health. In fact, there's a new study that was released by the University of New Brunswick late last year that clearly showed how people's health and well-being is impacting our productivity. Just look at those numbers. 50 billion estimated in the cost of mental illness to the Canadian economy. 3 out of 5 Canadians older than 20 have a chronic disease. 60% of the workplace experiences unhealthy and unwanted stress each day at work. And interesting is you see if the forecast is right, from 2010 to 2040, the cumulative cost for care for mental health will exceed 2.5 trillion.
Yeah,
One
that's
of
so oh, sorry, Lori. That
yeah,
is
yeah.
just astonishing. And we had a question from Kim about burnout and how burnout
Mhm.
negatively affects employee well-being and productivity. And I think this kind of answers that piece, right?
Absolutely. And we're gonna talk about those kind of a stress model in a second, but burnout is one of the things that's connected to each of these components. These are really startling, and I think it's only now that we're starting to pay better attention to that. So, as you've identified, this report and others that have been released in the last couple of years, especially within the last 18 months that I've found, draw a direct correlation to stress and poor mental health in the workplace. So if we look at a model of stress, and there's several out there, but I felt that this one really defined things quite well for us. That there are three main potential sources of our stress. There's environmental factors, so that's what's going on in our economy, politics, things like coronavirus. Our news is full of stressful situations, and we're bombarded with that bad news through so many media forms. And then there's organizational factors. So, what's going on inside the organization? Job demands, workloads, lack of clarity. There's interpersonal work relationships. And then there are the personal factors. So, what's going on in our personal lives? What's going on with our families, maybe our own personal finances, our personal relationships? So, those are all potential sources. And we all tend to respond and deal with stress in different ways. Some pull into their jobs and into their families, or some will seek support, some will not. And behaviors will be inconsistent depending on how we respond to stress. And it leads to different types of conflict or even how conflict is dealt with. And even trying to discern what are the real threats from perceived threats will add to the stress. How we process information or what we think is happening, and they will impact each area of our life. And particularly, we bring that all into our workplace. So the consequences then play themselves out physiologically, which is impacting our health. And you'll see, symptoms like the headaches and high blood pressure to heart disease, which links directly back to some of those statistics that we saw earlier. Psychologically, so we'll see that demonstrating and playing itself out as anxiety or depression, decrease of our interest in our job or other activities. And then behaviorally, so it impacts the workplace and your families, but workplace through productivity, absenteeism, turnover, and so on. But what we've learned by focusing on some of the productivity initiatives is that we can actually help support or offset some of those stress challenges. We can actually support organizational wellness. That people, when they understand where the organization is going, having a clear, communicating a clear vision and mission and purpose, looking at investing in our people, are we ensuring that they have the skills and the training to do the job? Clear documented business processes and procedures. And the cool thing is that the opportunity to engage your people to continuously improve and innovate is really, really powerful. It leads to increased engagement and actually elevates the positive culture of an organization. But having those clear task and role expectations, and I think one of the critical components, and Victoria and I were speaking about this last week too, is that there needs to be good change leadership within the organization that can help manage change. We're dealing with change constantly now. So it's a funny term to use the term change management because we're in a constant change of state of change.
Yeah, you know
So,
what? Funny, Lori, sorry,
mm, mhm.
in terms of the change management, I heard this really quite interesting statement the other day that said, we used to think needed to have a good IQ at one point in time to be successful in our jobs and careers, and then it changed to EQ. or emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. And then now we talk about you have to have a good AI, which is agility
Mhm.
intelligence, which is quite interesting, right? Being able to deal with the constant change, because, like you said,
Right.
change is the only constant.
Exactly. So when I'm working with an organization and looking at some of these key things, support mechanisms for supporting both productivity and well-being, beyond the leadership and management and the operational processes, we're looking at that agility and how are they scanning the horizon, looking at those impacts, both externally and internally, and helping develop the strategies and the processes to help their people maneuver through. And so, it's also important to include processes to address those interpersonal challenges. So, as I mentioned, stress will show different types of behaviors play themselves out, and a lot of that will lead to conflict management. So, there's lots of opportunity to be able to help your people with good conflict management skills, decision making processes, opportunity to engage and value every single person that's at the table. And so by paying attention to firm level productivity, and a number of studies have shown this more recently, it can lead to a higher overall employee engagement. Some of the other data that has come out recently is that show that the best performing companies on financial metrics were around 11 times more likely to offer holistic well-being policies than their lower performing peers. This is a form of wellness that extends beyond merely supporting initiatives for employee physical well-being. So Deloitte has suggested that these companies outperform their peers because employees felt more valued and more supported in such environments. And this general finding was supported in a second study that they did, which was recently published. And it highlighted that productivity gains can you can achieve those productivity gains when you meet the well-being needs of your employees. And the numbers here are staggering to see that kind of improvement through that blend of improved productivity, employee engagement, which is all tied to well-being strategies. But the real important part that I want to draw our attention to in this study, which has really shifted how I've looked at productivity, how I work with organizations around productivity and well-being and performance overall, is that when organizations focus as much on well-being as they do on productivity, it results in a simultaneous boost in both the output and the health levels of workers. That's critical. But really, what we need to note also is that this is not the case when productivity dominated at the expense of well being. And when they looked at this, they looked at the reverse. Both productivity and health fell when there was more emphasis placed on driving productivity. So if we circle back to the earlier reference, that earlier slide that I showed of national productivity and how it's measured and what national agencies have been looking at, we'll see that there was a very important metric missing. And I think we're beginning to spend more attention and more time looking at how can we add to the story of how our human capital, which is our labor force, which I prefer the term human capital, is performing. And it's the health and well-being factor. It isn't enough if we're working the longest number of hours or if we've employed the largest amount of the population that can work, or even if we have the most well-educated workforce. A missing link and a mindset shift as to how we think more holistically about our people, which is including their well-being, balanced with productivity and efficiencies and innovation, is really critical to looking at how we can continue to be competitive, both within our own organizations, but at a national level as well. I'll pass it back to Victoria for some strategies.
Thank you, Lori. So that gives a really good insight into how you need to grow both this productivity and well-being together to support firm effectiveness, right, and ability to perform well. So let's talk a little bit about some strategies to how we can support employee well-being that will as well support productivity. So I'm going to go through quite a few different examples here. And I'm going to go through at a high level just to give you some warning, but we will be having another follow up session next month that will go into more detail of some of those practical daily tips that we can use to support well being. And so stay tuned for that, and I'll share that more about that at the end. So just in case you're wanting to know a whole lot more about these, I'll be going through them a little bit more of a high level. So, Kim brought up a good question here about the burnout piece, right? And so
Mhm.
psychological health and safety is one of those really important things that we need to address for a lot of reasons, because burnout through, the Health Organization has defined it as a syndrome that is very real that people are experiencing, and as a result legislation is changing across Canada, and that is really making employers and employees both responsible, and giving them and employees and employers again also the duty and the right to support everyone to be healthy, both physically but psychologically, right, and even socially in different jurisdictions. And so paying attention to that and paying attention to our psychological health and safety standard is one way that we can do that. But I do know that for a lot of folks, the psychological health and safety standard can seem overwhelming. um, and so you take from it what you can to work with what works in your organization. And so with Wellness First Canada, we actually do have a 5-step guide that integrates the standard, and which simplifies it and breaks it down a little bit to support holistic well-being, and productivity and performance. And so that's just available on our website. But other things like earlier this when we asked about what well-being means, offering flex time and telecommuting options are really important things that can help support people to be well. Probably one of the best perks that you can help them to support them in work-life integration. Other things is, resilience is so key, is such a important thing right now when we think about change being the only constant, and having this ability to be very agile and to deal with change. And everybody has a different type of resilience, but the good thing is you don't have to be born with it. Resilience is something that can be learned. And so resilience training and our crucial conversations training to deal with conflict, and just to be productive with conversations, those types of things are all very, very helpful in terms of supporting fitness and the physical well-being of individuals and employees. You don't need to have a gym, because a lot of people didn't rank that very high, but just linking to community programs. A lot of programs like the YMCA or Good Life Fitness, they offer corporate discount rates. And so giving employees maybe the opportunity to participate in those things at a discounted rate together, and or to be healthier while at work through things like step challenges, is really can be simple too, right? There's Participation and a program called You Walk. Both have online step challenges that are good for creating a bit of competition and fun with employees. And then, of course, nutrition. Having sometimes a healthy meeting policy, it can be helpful to make sure that healthy foods are available, because we all know that if you're just if people are eating donuts, for example, and cookies and coffee, you'll have a sugar high, and you might be a little more productive for a minute, but then you're going to have a crash and you're going to have that lull, and that's gonna impact both, of course, your health and your productivity. So having access to things like that, having, for example, a fruity Friday where people alternate bringing in a bowl of fruit just to have fresh fruit available, is one thing that people can do. Another is having transit options, right, which is good for the environment, and helps support people. And so, in terms of if people are biking to work, having a safe place where people can keep their bikes can be helpful, and or offering through various municipalities, when workplaces offer different transit options, they can offer them at a discount rate for employees. And then obviously things like paramedical services, for example, The virtual healthcare also is becoming more popular, and there's we actually have a new member of Wellness Works Canada called Wello Virtual Healthcare, and they offer some actually very cost effective services to support employees getting better, quicker access to healthcare, from the comfort of their own home, that kind of thing. And so those are actually can be really useful as well. And then, of course, employee assistance programs are quite highly underutilized. And so, trying to eradicate the stigma that comes with using EAP programs, but most of them nowadays offer also well-being solutions as well. And then, I did mention before wellness challenges and competitions. So, bringing in the STEP challenge, for example, is a way to maybe create some friendly competition. And then, even going out and having things like wellness adventures or geocaching adventures can be really a lot of fun. I've done those a few times, and it's just a great way to support both things like teamwork. And what geocaching is basically people can use an app on their phone, or sometimes they're given a device, and then they have to go out and solve clues to find different items. And it really supports getting people out in nature, getting some fresh air, and working together. And those are kind of fun things that people can do. I also did want to mention as well, a lot of times, wellness programs don't need to be, I don't even like the word program when we talk about wellness and well-being, because I think, integrating it into existing mechanisms is the best thing that we can do. And so using your occupational health and safety joint worksite committees can be a great way. And or if you have a first aid kit, having a mental health box or a mental health first aid kit is also kind of a useful way that can help support people. So we actually offer these as well through Wellness Works Canada, and but you can also make them yourself. But they have, they include things like a guide to building a healthy performing culture, fidget toys, stress balls, step-by-step breathing exercise, resilience tips, motivational cards, mental health resources, mindfulness coloring sheets and pencil crayons, those kinds of things. And all of that can be helpful just to start to create a little bit of this culture where people understand that, their well-being is supported, and so that when they are experiencing high levels of stress, that they can take that moment to be well and to go use kind of some of the things there, in a kind of an existing mechanism that's already there, right? If you just have it right by your other first aid kit, and bring that into your occupational health and safety committee meetings. There's so many other ones. I had a comment here from Nathan, says that what he learned before is that there's individual accountability, but also organizational accountability, which I love. Right, it is a
Yeah.
shared responsibility for both the employer and the employer to do things like this, which is a great point, right? Employees,
Mhm.
no matter whether you have a leadership role or not, can can play a role in either asking for or supporting your own well-being or others. And so, yeah, and having tech products, things like that, can help support. It can support both sides, I think, right? With offering them,
Mhm.
devices and that type of things, and encouraging them, and just giving them those friendly nudges to be healthy and to be well. So other things, ideas here is, walking meetings can be really useful as well, right? We know that, even if you have a standing desk, that doesn't necessarily help to be physically active and get your heart rate up, right? It can help break up the sitting, which is really important. But walking meetings actually do help creativity and help support your mindfulness as well. And so those are a great tool to use. Even with clients, you can use them, right? And other things is giving people time to unplug, to meditate or have no talk times, just giving 10 minutes. You can block off a room in a boardroom or a meeting room for something like this, which can really help people, just because we live in this attention economy, knowledge economy. We are bombarded with information all the time, and having the ability to take a few minutes to meditate is can be really, and just to be mindful and not to be distracted, can be really helpful. Even giving employees signs that say in the zone or something, so that they're not constantly interrupted, gives them a kind of a friendly way to be to have time to kind of focus without the time as well. Things like midday fitness, of course, is really important, right? A lot of people experience that midday lull. And there's a lot of Lori and I were chatting, and there's so many great things that are online and are free. So if you have a smart meeting room with a screen, you can simply go to YouTube and find little exercises. And if you just set aside some time, you don't even need to hire an instructor and bring them in. You can just set off that time and then play something on the screen where people can get involved in a fitness class, a yoga class, and there's so many things that can be done where you don't need equipment, right? And even guided mindfulness things are available online and can easily be searched out. So lots of good things that we can do. Other examples too is healthy eating is such a challenge, and a lot of times because we're just in a rush, and so things like packaged foods become easy, and or we don't have the time to learn to prep healthy foods that we want to. And so doing things like offering cooking classes so that people can just learn how to maybe pack these nutritious snacks and or learn how to create healthy eating, but also to build some teamwork within groups can also really be helpful. And then, I already mentioned the idea of having fitness challenges, right? But there are a lot of apps. Virgin Pulse has a global one. UWalk has a good program. If you just go to uwalk.ca, Participation, they have a Get Up and Go program. There's so many challenges that are available there that are low cost or free to get people getting up and going. And the other thing too is you always want to know from employees about what they want and what they need. So sometimes our great ideas aren't necessarily what people want, right? So I'm giving lots of examples here and lots of ideas, but it's really important to make sure that we know what employees want and to get ideas from them, right? So that should always be a really key element to understand what they want and what they're needing. And so having maybe idea boards or having surveys available, right? And the other thing is the communications. And I think, Laura, you wanted to add a little bit here too, but, just having these little nudges to support employee well-being, throughout the day is really important, and to help remind them and engage them and inspire them, because sometimes it's not always easy to make the healthy choice at the right time. And so having point of decision prompts, for example, at an elevator, having a stair that, or having a sign that encourages stair use, or during the lunchroom, having a little poster that encourages healthy options. And there's a lot of these things that are available that can be downloaded that are online as well. So Laura, did you want to
Yeah.
mention something here?
So, yeah, the only thing I was going to add is that so the same things that we're focusing on for well-being and wellness, you can also apply to the productivity side too. So motivational ideas and tips, but getting the team together to inspire and to innovate and stimulate new ideas. We used to have an idea room that we could just spew out new ideas about how we're doing things and how we can improve things and how do we build and value new ideas. So idea sharing, we often call them creative collisions, and kind of made that a special practice, even weekly, to be able to do this. So applying it to the wellness side or applying it to efficiencies and new ideas and innovation.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. So there's so many ideas that we kind of went over, and there's so many things that we can do to help support employees. But one of the really important things to note is that in order to be able to really meet employees where they're at and understand what the key issues are from an organizational, before we were talking about how culture is an outcome of systems, processes, policies, demographics, etc. And in order to be able to really understand what is impacting culture, in order to create one that is productive and then one that is healthy, you need to really know where you're at. And so doing an assessment before diving into a lot of ideas is often a great idea. Sometimes there's definitely quick wins that we can just go ahead and implement. But in terms of creating a long-term sustainable strategy to support a healthy, high-performing culture, doing an assessment is a really good idea to understand where you're at. So with Wellness Works Canada, we are a for profit. And so we do have in our employer memberships, we actually offer our employers a audit and assessment and an employee survey and tailored recommendations and a strategy workshop, all at a really, really low cost because we're nonprofit. For example, our rates only range from about $500 to $1,250 for quite a robust suite of support in terms of helping you assess and identify where you're at, strategize a little bit, and support you with your evaluation. So if you are interested in something like that, of course, feel free to check us out a little bit more online to see what's available there. But there's also a lot of free tools that are available for employees, for employers as well, to be able to conduct your own assessment. And so either way, it is a good idea to really understand the current state of where your organization is at and all of the systems and processes and things that are impacting culture, and understanding the current state and the health of your employees, to understand also what they want and need, to be able to make sure that the changes that you implement really are going to be effective and sustainable. And so, of course, we just want to remember that, of course, the well-being of our people really are our most important resource that we can pay attention to in terms of supporting, organizational performance and effectiveness. And so it's really important to pay attention to these things. So, Lori, Lori has such a breadth and depth of knowledge and expertise. I just wanted to after we go through a few questions, I'm going to pass it back to her just to go over a little bit about Laurel Management Group, because it's quite an amazing thing that she is doing. So we're just going to open it up now here for some questions. Are there any other questions that we have just from the group about everything that we covered? I know we covered a lot over a high level, but we'll also be having another upcoming webinar next month that dives into a little bit more of some of the practical tools as well. So the webinar chat function should be open, and I know Nathan had a question there, and I think we answered that so a little bit. But you did make a good point here, Nathan, about can a company just take a tech product to support employee well-being? And yeah, that's not the only solution. It goes, I think, as I mentioned before, it really does go both ways. That can be a value add, absolutely an effective way to support giving positive messages and nudges to employees to be well. But it really is, again, that shared a responsibility of looking at, what are the other systems and processes that we have in place that are supporting employees to be well.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, different assessment tools, whether you're looking at your workplace wellness and health, or if you're looking at the operational effectiveness, are so valuable, right? So it's an opportunity to see where are you at now, and what are some areas that you want to tackle together? What are priority areas for both your people and your organization? I think there was another question there.
Hmm. Perfect. All right. Well, we will be making these slides available and we will send them out. And we will also have the recording that will be made available later as well. And I have one more question here from Robert. It says, would be most advantageous to have a plan? And absolutely, yeah, you need a plan, right? I think doing the assessment and kind of figuring out where you're at and then developing a plan from there is usually the best approach. Lori,
and so just to finish, that's a lot of the work that my network and I do, is really help with the assessment piece. How can we help your organization build capacity and capability to increase your impact overall? And so it's through assessment, but also then looking at how do you develop an action plan and coach that action plan, both helping, the leadership of the organization and what they can be doing to strengthen, how they're leading the organization, keeping all of these things in mind, as well as looking at the organization as a whole to say, where do they want to be? What does a healthy, productive organization look like? Where are they in their life cycle? And how do they look at what they need to focus on to be effective and healthy as they go to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely, Lori. That's the best approach to take, right? We
Hmm.
have another question from Owana. Says, can you speak to the impact of well-being of leadership team in supporting employees' well-being? And I
Mm,
think that absolutely
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
leadership is key. You need
Hmm.
to have them on board. Sometimes what happens is you can have in larger organizations, especially, you can have the leadership team very much engaged and supporting well-being, and that's kind of one of those. It's one of the pillars in our model as well to showcase. It's one of those fundamental pieces that's needed to be there. You need to have leadership on board and promoting and supporting well-being, but oftentimes in large organizations they will be really engaged, and sometimes the breakdown happens at the middle level, and so it's important for all leadership to be really engaged. Laura, did you have anything to mention there?
No, I think you've captured it really, really well. It starts with the leadership.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then it will permeate, and the leaders need to walk the talk, right? So they need to demonstrate all those, best practices, both of taking care of themselves and their people, as well as looking at productivity and efficiencies.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. All right, I don't see any more questions here. I'll just pass it to Laurel to Lori to speak a little bit about Laurel Management Group.
Yeah, I think, I've covered it. I think what I'd like to say is that this has been a quick drive-by of these topics. So feel free to connect to either one of us, and because we have so much more depth than we were able to cover today and within our networks. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. So as I mentioned, we will be making these slides available. And in case you're not later on, so we will email you with the recording and the slides and some of the resources as well that we mentioned. And in case you're just not familiar, but Wellness Works Canada, I give a high level overview at the beginning. But we are, again, Canada's not nonprofit workplace health and performance association, and really we're all just about advocating for the profound impact that well-being has on performance, and also just making resources, really simple evidence-informed resources available for workplace well-being practitioners and for employers. And so as an association, we are membership based, and so we support both individuals and workplaces of various sizes with pretty cost effective memberships to be able to really help build a healthy, high performing work culture. And so that's all I really have to say about Wellness Works Canada. But I do want to let you know that next month we also have it's a community of practice session, so it's a bit more interactive. It is a webinar style. However, you're welcome to join in and also share your video, and we have a lot more time for discussion. And Deborah Connors will be joining us for that, and we'll be talking about how to support a healthy culture with daily practices that work. So going into a little bit more of some of the specific practices and tips and tools that you can use to create a healthy culture within your workplace. So, since we are a couple of minutes before the end, as promised, we will give you a little bit of time to hopefully have your own little break before going on to your next venture. So, I thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you can join us for our next session next month. It's on March 10th at 1 p.m. It's a 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that'll be with Deborah Connors as well. So thank you, Lori, so much for bringing your valuable insights about,
Hmm.
and I wish you all a great day.
Yeah, and there was a couple of additional questions there I saw. If you would like some more information or content or resources, just please email me and I'll get them to you directly. Or Victoria, of course.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I see the question from Ruth Ann. Thank you.
Hmm.
Okay, great. Well, everybody have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.